We will now open the meeting for the St. Mary Parish School Board Special Education Advisory Council, Monday, November 4th, 2024, 4 p.m. in the Evans-Medine Meeting Room. We will now have roll call by Dr. Fagenbush.
Miss August? Miss Bartow? Miss Dr. Como?
Present.
Miss Jack? Miss Jamison? Miss Collins Lancelot? Here. Miss Lee? Present. Mr. Price? And Dr. Price. We have a quorum.
All right, we will now do approval of the minutes from the September 23rd, 2024 meeting. Everyone was provided a copy. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Can I get a second? All right, the minutes of the September 23rd, 2024 Special Education Advisory Meeting have been approved. All right, under new business, we will have Ms. Bonnie Miller presenting the discussion of the school building level committees, the purpose, and the process.
And ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, we do stream our committee meetings, so they are being live streamed for anyone who's watching. And so, Ms. Miller, could you introduce yourselves and let us know what you're doing and for St. Mary Parish and why you're here today?
Okay, sorry. My name is Bonnie Miller. I'm the coordinator of pupil appraisal in 504 for St. Mary Parish, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the school building level committee and the difference between 504 and IEPs. Okay. I do have a section at the end for questions. However, I encourage if anybody has a question or a comment, while I'm speaking, to please feel free to raise your hand and ask the question. Let's see. So on the agenda, I have, I may need some help with this. Okay, there we go. First, I'm going to talk about the SBLC, or School Building Level Committee, purpose and process, and then I'll go into 504, and then the IEP, and then the questions, okay? So first, the SBLC, basically, what is it? SBLC, stands for School Building Level Committee, and it is a committee or a team of people at every school. Every school in St. Mary Parish has an SBLC, and in fact, every school in Louisiana has some type of SBLC. It's required by law for schools to have the school building level committees. Different school districts call it different things. You may hear in other parishes or other districts, they may call it like a school assistance team or, different names. But here in St. Mary, we call it the SBLC, okay? And the SBLC is a committee or team of people. It is general education based, data driven. It is a decision-making team. The people that are on the SBLC include a facilitator, the principal or the designee, which is typically either the assistant principal or the dean of students at the school. The SBLC in general is the process through which anytime there's a student that's having a concern or an issue that somebody is concerned about, teacher, parent, they can refer the student to the school building level committee, and the committee meets to talk about what's going on with the student, discuss the concern, and see what can be done to assist the student. The standing members on the committee include the facilitator, as I said, the principal, the teacher, or whoever referred the student to the SBLC, the classroom teacher of the student if that is not the same person who referred the student. And of course, the parent is always an invited participant. And the parent, of course, is the most important member of the SBLC because they know their child better than anybody else. Additional members of the SBLC may include possibly the school nurse, pupil appraisal personnel, perhaps the curriculum facilitator at the school, a guidance counselor, or anybody else who is appropriate for the particular student situation or the concern that is presented regarding the student. And what does the SBLC do? The purpose of the SBLC is to act as the referral process for students who are experiencing academic or behavioral difficulties at school or who may be gifted or talented. The SBLC meets regularly. Every school has a schedule of SBLC meetings. They may meet monthly. They may meet every couple of weeks. It just depends on the school. The SBLC receives new referrals. If a parent or teacher is concerned about how a student is progressing or suspects that a student may be gifted or talented, they can initiate a new referral to the SBLC. And the SBLC also follows up on existing referrals. For example, if there's been a meeting on a student, say a teacher or parent has presented a concern, the SBLC met, made some recommendations, then the SBLC may follow up in a couple of weeks with another meeting to see how those recommendations are working for the student and if further action needs to be taken. And who can refer a student to SBLC? Basically, anybody who is concerned or has a relationship with the student. Most typically, it is the student's teacher who makes the referral. Often it is the student's parent who makes the referral, but it can be any personnel who interacts with the student. For example, it could be a PE teacher if there's a concern about the student's motor functioning. It could be, another teacher of this who interacts with the student, or, basically anybody who has a concern about the student can refer to the SBLC. And as far as the SBLC process, the parent is the first thing is whenever the student is referred to SBLC, if the parent was not the referring party, of course, the parent is promptly notified that the student has been referred to the SBLC, and there are rights that are provided to the parent whenever a student is referred to the SBLC, and those are given in writing to the parent. There's a meeting that is scheduled so that the concern can be discussed. Yes.
Quick question. So the parent is notified and the parent wasn't the one who identified a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Can the parent say, I'm not interested in this process, so please do not have this committee meeting?
They could possibly, yes, I mean, they could. Typically, whenever there's a concern about a student, before the student is referred to SBLC, the teacher is encouraged to speak to the parent about the concern. So typically there's some relationship or some process that's gone on prior to the initiation of the SBLC referral. And at the actual committee meeting, there's really there's no obligation for anything to happen at the meeting other than for the committee to talk and discuss and share the concerns. So it is encouraged for the parent to come and attend the committee meeting.
I'm asking questions I think that people might want to ask if they're sitting here to kind of help out. So when we do our child search
Yes.
program at the beginning of the year, let's say someone was referred through that, would that also go through the same process?
Child search is part of SBLC. Child search is the general procedure through which students are searched for or identified as having a concern. If the child is enrolled in school, the child search is filtered through the school building level committee. If a child is not enrolled in school, say they're too young to be in school, or perhaps they're homeschooled or whatever, they would not go through the SBLC in that process, in that instance. But yes, typically child search is filtered through SBLC. Okay? Okay. Yes.
Dr. Fagan, but some, to ask the questions that the parents, they ask us. Now, Dr. Fagenbush asked you if the parents have the right to opt out.
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
They do not, but we, as St. Mary Parish, have obligation to educate. So then on the other hand, we should proceed, and I want that to get out there. Even though a parent says no, we can proceed because we know, and here in St. Mary Parish, that we have to provide a free, appropriate public education because we suspect a kid has these or suspect something is going on, so we have to go on with the testing.
Yes, and whenever the parent is notified regarding the SBLC referral, there is a written notification that is sent to the parent, and along with the parent rights, and the notification specifies what the concern is for the student, whether it's, academic or whatever. Let's see. So at the actual SBLC meeting, what happens at the meeting is the referral concerns are discussed. Everyone is encouraged to share their concerns, the parent, the teacher, whomever is present at the meeting. And a decision is reached at the meeting, and the decisions can be possibly to continue with interventions that are already going on with the student, perhaps to add some more interventions, maybe, the student is not in some programs that could be helpful to the student, and so those could be initiated. Occasionally, the decision is to conduct no further action if once the SBLC meets and determines that the student is actually doing fine and there's really, not a concern, whatever the concern was, it's been resolved, there may be no further action. Or the SBLC could decide to refer the student for either a 504 evaluation or a 1508 evaluation. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the difference between 504 and 1508, or IDEA in special education. So in the circle that I put there, you can see in the big blue circle, that's all students are in there. And then 504 is a subset of students within the general education setting, and then IDEA is a smaller subset of Section 504. So we're going to start with Section 504. Section 504 is a civil rights, it's a law, it's a federal civil rights legislation that was implemented in 1973. It is called the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And the intent of the law is to prohibit discrimination against all persons with disabilities in all agencies, programs, and entities that receive federal funding. And that includes basically any public entity. That's Section 504 is the reason that we have handicapped entrances in buildings. It protects anybody that has a disability within the public realm. Within schools, it of course protects students, but it also protects employees, visitors to the school. For example, we have to have accommodations, like if a parent, we have to have our schools to be accessible to people that maybe need a handicapped entrance or need special accommodations to attend a meeting. Section 504 covers all of those people in addition to the students. But for purposes of this presentation, we're going to talk mostly about how Section 504 applies to students. The statute 504 again intended to prohibit any form of discrimination based on a student's disability. And the intent of the statute is to level the playing field for the student and provide equal access for students with disabilities to all educational activities, services, opportunities that are happening in school. It covers both academic and non-academic programs, for example, sports, field trips, and the like. For students in public schools, students who meet eligibility criteria for 504, that is determined through the SBLC committee. A student must meet the definitions of a student with a disability in order to qualify for the Section 504 protection. And there are basically two prongs to 504. First of all, the student has to be identified as having a disability. They have to meet the criteria as an individual with a disability, and that disability has to be impacting a major life activity of the student. And the legislation does not provide an exhaustive list of disabilities. It gives us a list of suggested disabilities, like an inclusive list. For example, like it may include, but it's not limited to. So it could include any disabilities such as a student's functioning regarding health, physical mobility, seeing, hearing, that sort of thing. Let's see where I'm on the slides here. So the first prong that a student has to meet is to determine whether they actually have the disability. Is there evidence of a disability, or is there a disability that is suspected for the student? And the disability is any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities for the student. And as I said, there is not an exhaustive list of disabilities which can result in eligibility. Rather, there's just there's a list of major life activities which could be impacted, but that as far as the disabilities, it could be pretty much anything. As far as most commonly in schools, it's students maybe that have like diabetes, perhaps attention problems, that sort of thing. And the major life activities that could be affected include caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, sitting, walking, sitting, standing. You can see there's quite a few areas that could be impacted. So the first step is to determine whether the student has the disability, and the second step is whether the disability is interfering with a major life activity of the student. And that is determined by the Section 504 or the SBLC committee at the school. And if the student does meet criteria for having the disability and it is affecting a major life activity for the student, then the next step is for the SBLC committee to develop what's called an individual accommodation plan. And the individual accommodation plan is called the IAP, and that is the written plan which provides documentation of the student's eligibility and the accommodations that are needed in order to level the playing field for the student with a disability. The plans are updated every year. Let's see.
Can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to stress the fact that you said the plans are updated every year. Parents need to know that it has to go back to the SBLC. Say, for instance, Deborah was on a 504 plan from August to May. Well, at the end of May, that plan is done. Then that's next year come August, the parents or whoever suspect that little Deborah's still having the same types of issues, then you sit back at the table. That's what a lot
Correct.
of people are not understanding, that it's not an ongoing thing. Oh, I need to be quiet because I'm going to get messed up. Go ahead.
Okay, so that is correct. So the first step is I said, is and Ms. McClarity said, is to determine that the student has the disability. They meet criteria for this, an individual with a disability. It is impacting a major life activity, and they are in need of an individual accommodation plan. Once that individual accommodation plan is developed, it is implemented in the regular education setting. It is not optional. It becomes a legal document at that point, and the school is obligated to follow it. The plan is updated annually. It can be updated more often if necessary, depending on the circumstances of the student. Reevaluations are conducted periodically. Once a student is determined eligible for 504, they do not necessarily remain eligible for 504 throughout their educational career. They are reevaluated every so often to see if they continue to meet the criteria. Sometimes they overcome, the disability doesn't impact them anymore, and so they don't require the individual accommodation plan anymore. Sometimes it is something that follows the student throughout their high school career. It just depends on the individual situation of the student. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes,
Now, you're
ma'am.
saying when they exit out of high school, what if they go to college? Can they still get the 504 accommodation, or is it only through high school?
No, Section 504 follows students through college. The difference is in the K through 12 setting, the school is responsible for child search or child find for finding the disability. Once the student enters college or a technical school, the student is responsible for initiating the process through which they can get the 504 accommodations.
Most of the times, Ms. Collins, they would refer back to the system because we do keep records. And because we've had some colleges to contact us, and we would then, with parent permission or the child's permission, because at that time that child would be age of majority to receive those records, and they could move forward from there.
Yeah.
But once they enter that, St. Mary Parish is done with providing those services. Did I answer your question? Did we answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Yes, and it's good to know that students know that 504 can continue if they continue to need it.
And that goes back to the transition plan. I know we're not talking about transition, but that's why we have those transitions meetings. And it's very important that parents attend with the students, even though they are reached that age of majority. that those questions and parents can know to ask those questions when children are entering either a trade school or a four-year accredited college. It's very, they really need to know that information.
I think it's important to note that 504 students are still considered regular education students. I don't know if we said that, but they're not gonna qualify for special education services under a 504 plan. And so basically, it's a student who has 504 is a regular education student receiving accommodations to support their regular education plan, which is totally different than when we're going into 1508.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to note.
That was on one of the first slides we discussed, but we didn't discuss it in depth. Sometimes we have to break things down for parents to really understand and be knowledgeable about how to advocate for their children. And I think we'd have an open table discussion about advocacy as well when you're talking about what is a 504 and what is a 1508.
Okay. All right, so, on to 1508. So the next section is IDEA, or Section 1508, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or Special Education. Um, and that is the IEP. In comparison to the IAP, this is students that would have the IEP. Huh?
You okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it. Thank you. Okay. So the IEP is the federal law which
It's a federal law that, that makes available to a free appropriate public education. And every child is deserving of this law. And that's where we start building the IEP. Oh, he's flipping the thing. But you should know this. You have to reference it. At the bottom, page 10.
So the IEP is the federal law developed through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA, which is the federal law from developed by the Office of Civil Rights in 1973. Mhm. Yeah.
All right, we're back. We apologize for that. We just had a little situation that we needed to monitor, and Ms. McClarity is going to finish our section on IEPs in 1508 that had already been begun. Thank you, Ms. McClarity.
You're very welcome. I want to go back a page to page 10 because I want to go back and refresh that law. Um, if you could just move it back one to page 10 for me, that federal law. The Individual Disabilities Act is an act that most parents don't understand, that we, St. Mary Parish, must provide a free, appropriate public education for all of our students, for every kid that we have. And I think we might have over 7,000. I'm not sure. Dr. Fagenbush, correct me if I'm wrong. It was originally passed in Congress in 1975 to ensure that all schools serve those students' needs, the needs of those students with disabilities. Now, if we go back and think about what we're saying with that IAP, you're doing the same thing. You're still servicing students, but not to that magnitude. That means we have identified, and I'm talking a little ahead of the slides, that we have identified a student with a specific learning disability that we need to address. Several updates since the original inception of this law, and it was most recent authorized in 2004, which it needs to be reauthorized again because kids have different, but we all know what Congress is doing right now. They're battling. But kids are changing, the world is changing, so we need to look at and go in specific as what individuals these kids need, the individuality of it. So I'm sure after all these elections and all these things going on, maybe Congress can find a way to get back to educating these students across this country. Okay, and that's my take on that. I'm sorry, I don't want to go off page here. Now the IEP, let's talk about the IEP. In order to receive special education and related services, a student must first be evaluated. That evaluation process is a 60-day process. We need parents' signatures, okay? On that first IEP, we need the parent's signature. We have OT, PT, everybody looks at this kid. That builds the IEP, the test and the evaluation part of it. Once they're through with all of the testing, all of the protocols, OT, PT, speech, everybody tests this poor baby for 60 days. They get with the parent, write a report, look in Bulletin 1508, and match what the test protocols and data that they have on this child to give them a label. Now, I have a problem with that because just because this child has been identified as specific learning disabled, that doesn't mean he has to have that label throughout the career. I want to make it known here tonight, and I'm glad I'm speaking about it, because special education in St. Mary Parish we consider a service. They're not there to stay. We're there to make sure that they can be in that general education population and be successful students. That's what special education should do for our students here in St. Mary Parish. And that is our goal, to do that. But getting back to the IEP, because remember, it's the difference between that IEP and that 504 plan, which is the IEP, okay? Talked about that. We talked about eligibility. Next slide. This IEP team is comprised of the teacher, including the regular education teacher, which is very important. We cannot leave that person out because we want that kid inside of that classroom, not outside that classroom. Special education personnel, of course, to write that IEP. Official ODR, designated representative. Now that could be the principal, assistant principal. Normally it's the principal, assistant principal. Right now in the district, and the districts where they're making these facilitators and deans of students, not only in St. Mary Parish, but across the state, I'm seeing that they're allowing them to be a part of it because it is a learning experience, which we should have been doing years ago, if you want to know my opinion about it. Because you specifically know that individual child, and when you build an IEP, those people at that table should know. So it could be a lot of people there. You don't want too many people because parents kind of shy away when they don't know what you're talking about, and you got a whole lot of OTs and PTs and speech therapists and all these people saying this about this child. So you kind of want to keep it as, how should I say, as family oriented as possible, so that the parents are able to feel free to discuss the child's disability, okay?
Ms. McClarity, just to hop in, because we've had this conversation so much, you and I, about parent or it's the legal guardian.
Parents, the legal guardian. It has to be the legal guardian. Not anybody who said, oh, I'm coming sitting with the parent today. No, 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 no. The parent is the legal guardian who is by the law, in this country, that is allowed to make educational decisions for his or her child. Now, the only way, on the other hand, thank you, Dr. Fagan Bush, that it cannot be the parent is if they go to an attorney, not the justice of the peace, not somebody to sign papers for them. It has to be an attorney or judge saying, I'm going to grant Melissa Lee educational rights to Deborah. Do you see the difference here?
But what happens after they do that
With the parent? Well, the parents doesn't have those rights anymore. So that's where we have to make parents understand what rights are you giving up at that time, okay? And some parents do, because one parent may live in Texas, for example, and they're not going to come down here all the time. But if they sign by a judge, not the people that I discussed earlier, and it's sealed, that they have the right to make educational rights. Notice what I said, educational rights. So the only thing they're going to make a decision on is about that child's education. Because that's what it should say, educational rights. Are we seeing the difference in the balances here? Any questions thus far?
Once the parent gives the judge the ability to make the educational rights for their student, will there be a time where the parents say they move back into town and can be active in the child's education, at that point be able to make those decisions again?
Good question. Yes, they can. All they have to do is go back and reverse it. Because notice, they're not giving up custody. Right. It's not custody they're giving up, because it says specifically educational rights to make decisions about that child's education while he or she is in school.
Okay.
And so it's not, I'm not giving my child away. And sometimes we have to do that because it's a struggle for parents. And sometimes we have to do that. Okay? Thank you. That was a very good question. A student's IEP is an individual plan developed to meet the specific needs, specific, unique needs of this child. And that's very important, because whatever we put in there, whatever the data shows, is specific to that child, okay? And that's what an IEP should be. Like Deborah may have specific learning disabilities. Every objective, every goal should be specific to what I need to improve on. Not what you think. Strategies that can help me to take this label off of this IEP. And we've had some success in the district with that, but it's a battle with some parents to understand that, your child doesn't need to be here. Your child needs to be in that general ed classroom. That's where we want these children to be, so that they can get the maximum of education that they can get. That's what we're pushing for. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, that's the next slide. Okay, the IEP contains information about the student, which as their present level of performance, what the child can do. Not what you think the child can do, what the child can do. The strengths and supports, and we say supports, strategies, intervention, data-driven supports, data-driven strategies. Because where are you getting all this information from? The evaluation. And see how it's different from the IEP and the IEP, how much data you collect to put in that IEP. And I'm not saying it's not a lot of data for the IEP, but it's more data for the IEP because it's specific to that child, okay? Um, Concerns of the parents, and that's one thing I want to talk about this afternoon too. Parents come to meeting, they don't feel comfortable to say, I have these concerns. It is the right of the parents to say, I am concerned about Deborah's English skills, her writing skills. Because we see kids now, they can't write. They can't write in cursive. You have to write a check in cursive, correct? You can't print a check. So that's what I'm talking about, those specific skills that a child needs to be successful in life. And those are the concerns of the parents. So when you're building that IEP, that's what you need to say as the team determines. Because everything we do is team. It's not just one person sitting at that table. It is a team discussion and a team effort to build that, to make it specific to that child. And it very individualized. Because you have all this data out here. And IEP is data driven. Your PLAFs are data driven. Okay? Where do we get our data from? The IEP, standardized scores, what they have done in the past, behavior, all of those things are all combined in there. You look at the IEP, you have only a little parts of that, okay? Because it might be IEP can be medication as well. So that's the difference between your IEP and your IEP. IEP contains goals developed to help the student. I've talked about that. And we want them to be successful in the general curriculum. Those are some things that I talked about as well. Give you an example. We have kids that are well capable in a general curriculum, but they only have that one specific skill that they're not really getting. And that's where your resource teachers come into play, to work specifically that skill. Strategies in place for that skill to keep that kid in that general ed setting and success. Because we have to move our graduation rate, and our kids are a big part of that graduation rate. Remember, I keep saying special ed is a service. We don't want to keep them there. We want them to be successful. And that's the difference between an IEP and an IEP. Includes the special education and related services a student will receive and may include accommodations needed in a regular education setting, which is simple accommodations. Listen, our teachers in this district, and I must say, do a wonderful job with accommodations. You don't have to be in the special education setting or special ed students. Our teachers in this district repeat things over and over and over again. You know, so that's helpful. That's what I can say. So the teachers are naturally giving accommodations. And some of the teachers, bless their heart, they're not even realizing that they're giving accommodations. Because when you go into the classroom and talk with them about the accommodations for a special education student, say, I do that. Well, yes, you do. You do it on a daily basis. You do it every day. You not only do it for this kid, but you do it for every kid in the district. So our kids are getting what they need. But we need the help from the parents to make sure that the education they're getting at home, we call them two testers in our office, because what we make in our special ed office for our kids who need those special accommodations, we make a set to go home. And that means they need that work at home to be consistent. And when the education is consistent, learning is consistent. Does that make sense? I'm moving. Any questions thus far? Oh, of course, I went through. Any questions? Because I can stand up here and talk about this all day. I mean, this is my playground here, honey. But that is the difference. And, you know, it's a good discussion. And the parents and committee here, I want you to go back and reach out to some parents to let them know this is what your child, I saw you taking a lot of notes, Ms. Bartow, and thank you for that because, you know, we've had some conversations before about what your child is getting and what he needs or she needs to get. Okay? So we have to be advocates for our children as well. Also, on the other hand, our children are old enough to advocate for themselves. They can ask in a nice way that, Miss Susie, I don't understand this. She's not going to bite their heads off. They're not. I can honestly say, guys, our teachers do a heck of a job in the classrooms. They may be new, but they're trying and they're working with our kids, all of our kids, not just my special ed kids. So we have to help them to be successful as well as, I know Ms. Bart, come on, give it to me.
I wanted to give some accolades on that point. I do appreciate what I have been able to see in the development of um, accommodations for my child, and I did have a son who was in the 504 program as well, and it makes a big difference when they know that they do have somebody who will help them out with situations that they know they just need a little push in this area, or they know that they can do it if they are shown in steps that maybe the other kids might have gotten further back, that they may have missed or was not exposed to because of the accommodations that are trying to be made in other areas of weakness. But I wanted to give a thank you out there for the things that we have seen so far. And I'm encouraging the staff to continue, keep up the good work because it matters.
Yes, it does. And that's not just a special ed, that's a district, what we do. Because what we do, we're a team here in the district and we work all together. Because Dr. Fagenbush can tell you sometimes I come and say, what I need to do, can you help me? We have these long, not often, but sometimes I come and we have these conversations, you know. And it's just when you bounce your ideas off of someone else, you know, it helps you to say, oh, I can go back and help this teacher do this. And I always tell people, never be afraid to ask questions. You're not going to know how to help your kid if you don't ask questions. And we're open and willing to hear what you have to say. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you guys for letting me finish the presentation. This is my wheelhouse, and I love it. And I know how Dr. Fagenbush is saying, Ms. McLaren, it's time to sit down and be quiet. So thank you very much.
You have the next item, actually.
I have the next item. It was bowling. Oh, bowling was a wonderful event this year. The kids were excited. The parents were excited. They ate a lot of food. We're going to look into spring for our track meet coming forth in the spring. I haven't set a date for it yet, but I want to thank you parents who let your kids participate. All the schools participated, and that's exciting. So, you know, our kids, my kids, the district kids, they don't have football, but they have bowling, and they look forward to it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Fagenbush, too, because a lot of that she has a hand in as well, you know, and also Dr. Sanders. They have to put up with me, with my kids. So, you know, every time I can get to publicly acknowledge the support that they give us, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaren.
Y'all tell me to sit down? Okay.
All right, moving on to item 4. Do we have any other comments or questions from any committee members or attendees?
I would like to just make a quick comment. Piggybacking on the Special Olympics bowling, we would really like to thank the school administrators and faculty and staff. It was obvious the care that is given to our children of special needs who were there participating. And we also want to thank all of our children. We had FFA there, we had some JAG organizations, we had different groups there also supporting that day. It was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So I think the parents enjoy it too. It's a definite fact. So thank you.
All right, at this time, we will close the regular meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee. I need a motion to adjourn that meeting. I pressed my gavel too soon.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I need a second.
I second Jennifer Collins.
All right, at this time, we will now close our meeting.